Hello and welcome to this video on different types of chords. But first, to understand the different types, we must understand what a chord itself is and how we go about making them. The vast majority of chords are made up of three individual notes played at the same time to create an overall picture, a bit like different ingredients of a piece of food that come together to create a whole thing. Although a chord can be made of two notes, most typically chords are made of three notes, and whenever we come to name a type of chord, we always start with a three-note chord and then either add notes or subtract notes and alter the name to fit. The first types of chords we're going to look at are called major and minor triads, or major and minor chords. These are the most consonant type of chords, in the sense that all the notes sound harmoniously together and there's no sort of tension or urge to go somewhere else in the piece. In most songs, we use major and minor chords at the beginning and end, especially at the beginning and the end, because they're sort of the most grounded and the most whole. They don't cause you to have a desire to go elsewhere and resolve to another place. So they create a really nice landing point for a piece to finish at, as well as a nice springboard for one to take off from. Major and minor chords are stacked in thirds, that is, all of the notes are three apart from each other. An example of this is the C major chord, which is the most common chord on the ukulele. Because it's a C major chord, we'll start with the note that's in the name of the chord, C, and then we'll just count three notes away, C, D, E, well that happens to be our E string, and then three more, E, F, G, oh there we have a G. So those three notes create a C major chord. Of course we have this spare A string. Now on most, when we're playing major and minor chords on the ukulele, we often have to double one of the notes, because otherwise we get a sound that isn't a C chord. So in this instance we're doubling that C note. There's an octave between them, but there's two C's, one E and one G. And that's a C major chord. That same logic can be applied to all major and minor chords. So if you take this F major, for instance, we've got F, A, C, and the A is doubled, just so we don't get with that awkward open string that might change the sound of the chord from anything other than an F major chord. And one more example is an E minor chord. We've got two G notes here, along with an E and the B. Now we've got an understanding of major and minor chords, let's look at what actually makes them different. We've said that they're all stacks of thirds, C to E to G, for a C major chord. But what's the difference between a C major and a C minor, for example? A C minor chord is C, G, E flat, not an E. So there's clearly something going on with that middle note, that E, that's changing between the C major and the C minor chords. Well, we are taking the assumption that the word major means big compared to the word minor, which means small. So the E flat is closer to that C note, because it's only 3 frets away, 1, 2, 3, whereas the E is an extra fret away from the E flat. Therefore, we can say that the gap between the C and the E flat is smaller than the gap between the C and the E. You can hear how the E flat is lower in pitch than the E. That's Jaws for you. So, because that C to E flat gap is smaller, or is the smallest of the two, we can call it a minor interval. Therefore we can say that if the E flat appears with the C and the G, it's a minor chord because we've got the smaller version of that first interval, the C to E something, whether it be E natural or E flat. So you can see the smallest gap, 3 frets, it's a minor chord because we've got the smallest of the intervals, the minor interval. Whereas if we take the E and put it with the C and the G, we've got the bigger version of the gap from C to E something, whether it be natural or flat. Therefore we call it a major chord because it's got the larger version of that interval, the major third. Major chords are often notated as just the letter, whereas minor chords are often the letter and then a lowercase m. Sometimes you will see major chords with the suffix maj, M-A-J, or uppercase M, but that's very rare. Some people will do it, but most won't. It's a bit like positive and negative numbers. With major chords, we can assume that they're major. Just like a positive number, you assume it's positive because you don't write the plus sign. Whereas a minor, you have to have the M. Like you would have a negative number, you'd have to write the negative dash before it to show that it was a negative number. So that's the difference between major and minor chords. They're usually built around the scales and depend on the first interval between the first two notes, whether it's the small version of the interval or the big version of the interval, hence the words major and minor. We're going to go to two-note chords now. Now often two-note chords are just like a harmony, like two singers singing. These aren't that common, but they still appear quite a lot. And normally what we name them after is, they're either two of the notes from a three-note chord, and so that chord, the two-note chord, just gets named after its equivalent three-note chord. For example, in C, if I was just to play the C and the E with no G, we can still call that a C major chord. Likewise, if I played a C and an E flat, but with no G, that's still a C minor chord, even though there's only two notes. The other type of two-note chord is a power chord or a bare fifth chord, where we actually remove the middle note from that trio. So in a C power or a C bare fifth, you would have no E at all, so it would just sound like... This chord is neither major nor minor, which gives it its own distinct quality. So there's a major, there's minor, and then here's the bare fifth. You'll sometimes see this notated as C5, for example. Going in the other direction from two-note chords, you've got three-note chords, and then you can have four-note chords. The most common type of a four-note chord is a seventh chord. There are four different types of seventh chords. These are chords that you've got the normal major or minor triad, and then you add another note that is a third away from the highest note of the triad. So the first type is called a major 7. So this is where you take the seventh note of the major scale and add it to the triad. It sounds really jazzy because it's dissonant or unsettled, but it also has a peaceful quality to it. So here's C major 7. A dominant seventh, also known as just a seventh, given that it is the most common type and is used in all genres, is where you take the seventh note of the major scale, just like a major 7 chord, but you flatten the seventh note by one semitone, or one fret. It creates a real sense of tension that wants to be resolved by moving to another, more consonant chord. And here's C dominant 7, or just C7. Notice the semitonal difference between C dominant 7 and C major 7. All the other strings stay the same, it's just that semitonal difference that differentiates the two chords. A minor seventh is a minor chord with the seventh note of the natural minor scale. It creates a similar sound to that of the dominant seventh, but with slightly less tension. Nevertheless, the tension that it does have creates a funky sound and is often used to colour up and jazz up a normal minor triad. C minor 7. Finally, we have a chord that is so rare that it hardly ever gets heard or even mentioned in tutorial videos explaining seventh chords. The minor major seventh is where you take the minor seventh and you raise it by a semitone. The reason for the name is that it is a minor chord with a major seventh note, the major again referring to the bigger interval between the seventh note and the one below it. C minor major 7. After seventh chords, we then get ninths, 11ths and 13ths. These are, again, more thirds that keep making the stack go as high as you can imagine. The only problem is we then run out of strings for a ukulele, because then we have 5 notes and beyond. When we play these 5-note plus chords, we have to make some sacrifices on the ukulele and leave out some of the notes. For example, A C9 chord is where you take a C7th chord, so you already have C, E, G, B, and you add a note that is 9 away from C. So that's actually a D, but in the higher octave. Obviously we've got 5 notes, so we can't play this on the ukulele. But if you remove the B, you get something called a C add 9. So it has a similar effect to a C9, but you don't have the 7th below it, so you just get a C add 9. Likewise, a chord C, E, G, B, D, F, A is a C13. It's the largest number you can go because you're basically playing all of the white notes, or all of the natural notes. However, this can sound very cluttered, and so what you tend to do is take out some of the notes in between the 5th and the 13th. So you might take out the 7th again, indeed the 9th and 11th, so you could get a C add 13 and just have a chord that was C, E, G, A. I should point out that with these notes that go beyond 8, i.e. 9 and onwards, these are called compound intervals. So in a C major scale, the first D is considered the second note of the scale, but because we've stacked a D on top of the entire triad, the D in the next octave is 9 notes away from C at the start of the scale, and therefore is called a ninth, or a compound second. However, you can bring this D back down an octave to make it a normally sounding second, and this creates a chord called C add 2, as opposed to C add 9. Additionally, a C add 13ths A note can be brought back down an octave to create a C6. The interval of a 6 is considered consonant, so it is the only chord with a number after the letter that is not dissonant. All the other intervals are dissonant, like the C clashing with the D, creating a messy relationship. You can play about with these extensions too, so instead of just having a C9, you could have a C flat 9, or you could have a C sharp 9. So those are all the different types of extensions of chords, or extended chords, where you've got 4 or more notes that create a dissonant colour palette to what you're playing. We're going to look at suspensions in the next episode of this 2-part video, so make sure you subscribe to learn more about different types of chords and things like that. If you like what you've seen, you can leave a tip. My PayPal link is in the description. It really keeps me going and helps these videos out. And if you want to get extra content and get these videos early, please join my Patreon. Again, the link is in the description, where you can get lots of benefits from just pledging a few pounds a month. I'd be very grateful if you could join me on those services, and if you have, then great, but if not, then I'll see you in the next part of this video, coming in a few weeks, Types of Chords Part 2. Please like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much.